One of the Jewish values that our rabbis try to transmit to us in a very strong way is personal responsibility. Let me explain. This week we read about the holidays. We know that on holiday, Yom Tov, we can do certain things that we cannot do on Shabbat. So, for example, cooking, we're not allowed to cook on Shabbat, we're allowed to cook on Yom Tov. On Shabbat, you have to cook before Shabbat in order to have the food for Shabbos, but Yom Tov, you can cook on Yom Tov. Yom Tov, there is a value called Simchas Yom Tov, the joy of Yom Tov. So if it tastes better, if you do it on Yom Tov, you could do it on Yom Tov. To the extent that if you were able to, you could even slaughter the animal on Yom Tov because it tastes better if it's fresh. However, anything you could do before Yom Tov, that you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov. Even if the prohibition of doing something before Yom Tov is not biblical, but rabbinic, it is not allowed to be done on Yom Tov if you were able to do it before Yom Tov. So, for example, grinding pepper or grinding your spices. If you could have ground it before Yom Tov and it tastes the same, then if I would grind it on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to grind it on Yom Tov. You have to do it before Yom Tov. And if I didn't, too bad, you cannot use it. You can't have it. Hold on, but I'm going to miss out on my joy of Yom Tov. Yes, but you should have had the personal responsibility before Yom Tov to make sure you had the spice available for Yom Tov. Similarly, on the 8th day of a bris, you could make a bris even on Shabbat. So if the child is born on Shabbat, the 8th day is the next Shabbos, a Moel is allowed to do the bris, not only allowed to, it's a mitzvah to do the bris on Shabbos. Now, the act of a bris is a violation of Shabbos. You cannot take a knife to wound someone or an animal, etc., on Shabbos. But the bris overrides it. However, if you don't have a knife, if you don't have the proper tool for the bris, and you could get it from a place that you wouldn't be allowed to normally bring it from there on Shabbos, then you cannot bring it on Shabbos. Why? Because you should have prepared it yesterday. You should have brought it yesterday before Shabbos. But doesn't matter. Today is Shabbos and I have to do the mitzvah. Yes, but you didn't. You should have brought it yesterday. And the fact that you didn't, our sages are teaching us a very important value. That there's an area of personal responsibility to prepare for something today, and you didn't do it yesterday, then they say you can't do it. You can't. In other words, the value of personal responsibility overrides the value of the joy of Yom Tov. The value of personal responsibility overrides even the bris today. The fact, for example, there's another place that we have this law. Taking a haircut on Chol Hamoed. You're not allowed to take a haircut on the intermediate days of a Yom Tov. That is provided you could have taken the haircut before Yom Tov. But if someone is a mourner, for example, he couldn't have taken the haircut before Yom Tov, or he came out of prison, he couldn't take the haircut before Yom Tov. He's allowed to take it on the intermediate days of Yom Tov. So again, what does it tell us? That Yom Tov, you should prepare for Yom Tov and have a haircut before Yom Tov. If it wasn't possible, then you could take the haircut on the intermediate days of Yom Tov. But if it was possible, then, and you didn't, you happen not to, and now I'm in the middle of Yom Tov and I'd like to have the haircut, the Torah tells us you can't. Our rabbis tell us you can't. Why? Because the value of having personal responsibility to prepare overrides the value of having the haircut now on Yom Tov. The value of having personal responsibility to prepare for Yom Tov overrides the joy of Yom Tov in having this food item Yom Tov. So I think that's what they wanted to train us with, that to take responsibility. And this applies, for example, a bar mitzvah boy. When is his obligation to put on tefillin? If his obligation is the first day of him becoming a bar mitzvah, but where does he have tefillin from? That means he has to prepare tefillin beforehand. So there's an obligation prior, so that he should be able to put on tefillin when he becomes the bar mitzvah. We have a mitzvah of sukkah. When does the obligation begin? It doesn't begin on the night of Sukkot, because if I don't prepare a sukkah beforehand, I won't have a sukkah on Sukkot. So the Torah when it tells us certain values, it also tells us that we have to have personal responsibility to prepare, to be ready, to be able to do those things when they come up, which emphasizes the value, the importance and the value of personal responsibility. This is something we have to give our children, the understanding how important personal responsibility is. Good Shabbos.